Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something deeply human, something most of us think about, whether we admit it or not. Likability. Let's be real, almost everyone wants to be liked. And looking at the sources you shared with us, it's clear why. Research and articles confirm that being likable isn't just about feeling good. It can bring tangible benefits, everything from professional success to, personal happiness, better health, stronger relationships. That came through loud and clear in the INSEAD study intro and the ADD Resource Center article.
That's right. And our mission for this deep dive is to take the stack of sources you provided and really go beyond that surface level stuff. We're going to explore the surprising shadow side of likability, try to understand where this powerful desire truly comes from, and most importantly, figure out what really works for building genuine connection, according to, solid research and practical experience.
Yeah, and we've got a truly fascinating mix of sources for this exploration. We have an academic study from INSEAD that digs deep into that shadow side. Really interesting stuff. We've got groundbreaking research from Harvard on the simple yet powerful act of asking questions. There's an article breaking down the science of being likable, some incredibly insightful crowdsourced wisdom from a popular online forum, and even a piece that looks at the slippery slope of sycophancy. It's quite the collection to pull from.
Absolutely. By the end of this deep dive, you should have a much clearer picture of the complex psychology behind wanting to be liked, and hopefully some truly actionable insights you can apply in your own life to build more authentic connections.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
So, starting with that INSEAD study, they introduced this core concept that while likability is almost always seen as purely positive, there's definitely a shadow side. This isn't always immediately obvious, and it might be called by other names, like rescuer syndrome, where the need to help or save others is often driven more by the need to be liked or needed than, genuine altruism. Crucially, this shadow side involves significant negative impacts, specifically on the person who is trying so hard to be liked, even if their outward behavior seems helpful or agreeable.
Right. What does that actually look like for the people interviewed in the study? They shared some really specific examples, didn't they? These aren't abstract ideas, they're like real life struggles. Like Lydia, who was a new mom, 1 year old, and found it agonizingly hard to reprimand her nanny for being late. Just basic punctuality. Her deep concern was that protesting, even for something reasonable, might make her unlikable to the nanny and potentially jeopardize the care for her child. That's intense.
It is intense. Or Karen, who described completely backing down in an argument with a colleague who had genuinely let her down at work, simply because of this extreme wish to be liked and avoid conflict.
Yeah, that fear of conflict avoidance at any cost seems like a major theme.
Absolutely. The study also highlighted people like Finn, who repressed any negative feelings, anger, frustration, didn't want to be seen as unlikable,
Yeah.
leading to them eventually erupting, as he put it, like a volcano.
Wow, that sounds utterly exhausting.
It truly is. And then you have Zach, who struggled immensely with even simple decisions, like picking a restaurant for lunch, or coffee, or tea. Constantly anxious about disappointing others, he'd reflexively say things like, "Oh, I don't mind," which, ironically, ended up irritating people around him, because they felt they couldn't get a genuine preference from him.
Right, the very outcome he was trying to avoid just by being agreeable. Crazy. And Adela, the physician who made huge personal sacrifices early in her career, overextending herself for patients out of fear of disappointing them. This came at a high cost, leading her to miss crucial time with her young son and feel deep guilt about it later.
And the study also touched on how this struggle led people to make choices that actually harmed their relationships. Like Naomi, who realized she surrounded herself only with people who offered a basic sense of comfort and security, even if they didn't add value or, might even take advantage of her. She actively forfeited potentially valuable friendships, prioritizing that feeling of security over deeper connection. Lydia also noticed her own friendships were often more superficial compared to her husband's, who was perhaps less outwardly focused on being liked, but had built these really close, deep friendships.
That makes so much sense when you connect it to Maslow's hierarchy, which the source mentions, right? If you're stuck constantly trying to meet that basic need for safety or belonging by being liked and avoiding conflict, you might not feel secure enough to seek those higher level needs like deeper, more authentic relationships or, self-actualization.
Exactly. And ultimately, as Karen's example showed, this intense drive to be liked often means losing your authenticity, suppressing your true needs, preferences, even feelings. So, while wanting to be liked is natural, the intense need for it can be a significant, harmful struggle, with tangible negative effects on the person themselves, leaving them feeling exhausted, resentful, and strangely disconnected, despite appearing agreeable on the outside.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. The INSEAD study didn't just describe the symptoms, did it? They used psychodynamic lenses, essentially looking at the unconscious why behind the struggle, digging deep into people's inner worlds. What did they find powering this intense need?
Well, they identified a couple of key unconscious forces at play. One is the active, often desperate pursuit of psychological safety and security. Naomi articulated this powerfully. To be liked means to belong, and to belong for me is a question of security. Just wow. Finn sought harmony purely for a sense of security. Brian feared the unknown beyond likability, feeling like if he wasn't focused on being liked, he'd be out of control. This deep-seated fear of losing that sense of security, however fragile, is truly terrifying for them.
And the second key driver they identified, what was that?
The perception of being likable as an ideal self-image, something they felt they should embody or strive for. 5 of the interviewees mentioned this internalized pressure to be the person who was liked by everyone.
And the study made a strong case that the roots of these adult struggles go even deeper, right into childhood experiences.
Absolutely. The study connects these adult patterns directly to unmet needs in childhood. Big time. One significant root is an unfulfilled sense of belonging, a lack of consistent love or nurturing, or feeling excluded from the core family unit. Naomi described her parents as a monoblock, feeling sensitive to exclusion from day one, like she was somehow inherently at fault for not belonging. Karen felt like the cuckoo in the nest, and the idea of being sent to boarding school, even temporarily, was terrifying, like being thrown out. The study suggests this can lead to something called repetition compulsion, unconsciously repeating behaviors or dynamics from childhood and current relationships, almost as if trying to finally fix or meet that original unmet need for belonging.
Repetition compulsion. Huh. Trying to fix the past and the present through current relationships. Okay. What else did they identify?
Insecure attachment patterns. Yeah. This often stems from caregivers who were physically or emotionally absent or unreliable. The mother's depression was a significant factor for 4 of the interviewees: Adela, Karen, Brian, and Zach. Adela's mother was hospitalized when Adela was only 1 year old, leading to Adela's core childhood fear that translated into an adult pattern. If I try very hard to be liked, the person would not go away. Okay. Naomi's father was grieving. Her mother returned to work, relying on a series of changing au pairs, creating inconsistency in care. Naomi's mother also had this push and pull pattern in their relationship, which Naomi herself likened to the childhood Jokari game, that back and forth that never quite connects reliably. Naomi found herself replicating this inconsistency in her adult friendships. This again ties into repetition, compulsion, and transference, unconsciously transferring emotions, expectations, patterns learned in those early caregiver relationships onto current ones.
Wow. So it's about trying to get fundamental needs met now that weren't met back then,
Yeah.
often through these unconscious repeated patterns.
Exactly. And finally, the study referenced the concept of conditional parental love. This comes from Alice Miller's work, particularly The Drama of the Gifted Child. It suggests that children, needing attachment to survive, learn to adapt their behavior to meet parental expectations to gain acceptance. If that acceptance feels conditional on being good or pleasing, it can lay the groundwork for this adult pattern of needing to be liked just to feel secure.
So, okay. The deep-seated fear of not belonging, of being abandoned or not being enough, often learned in childhood through these specific experiences, drives this incredibly powerful adult need to be liked, even when it leads to self-sabotage and harm.
Yes, and this intense drive, this need rooted in fear, can actually lead to behaviors that are ultimately counterproductive, really stopping genuine connection. This brings us to people-pleasing and sycophancy, which were discussed in some of the other sources you sent.
Right. According to the Haley McGee source, what's the key difference between genuine kindness and this pattern of people-pleasing? It seems subtle but really crucial.
The core difference is the motivation. It's all about the why. People-pleasing is fundamentally driven by fear of rejection, conflict, punishment, or simply avoiding any potential negative outcome from others. It's prioritizing what you think others want or expect from you at the expense of your own needs, boundaries, well-being. The source describes it as pathological altruism, meaning you're actually harming yourself in the process of trying to meet others' perceived needs. Kindness, on the other hand, is driven by desire and choice. It's healthy altruism. You choose to help or support others, but you also meet your own needs and maintain your integrity in the process.
Okay, so the key indicator isn't just the action itself, like saying yes, but how you feel inside while doing it.
Precisely. If you appear happy, agreeable, generous on the outside, but inside you feel resentful, overwhelmed, drained, or disconnected, That's people-pleasing. If your insides match your outsides, you feel genuinely happy, satisfied, or aligned with your values by giving or helping, that's kindness. People-pleasing often leaves you feeling empty and disconnected despite your efforts. Genuine kindness can lead to fulfillment and authentic connection.
And sycophancy from the Workplace Hero article, that sounds like people-pleasing taken to an even more extreme kind of performative level.
It is. It's characterized by excessive flattery, obsequiousness, actively pretending to be someone or something you're not, just to gain favor. It's driven by fear, much like people-pleasing, but often also by ambition, a calculating desire for power, influence, advancement. The source links it to potentially primal evolutionary instincts. Interesting. Sometimes it's also simply driven by navigating societal or organizational norms that seem to reward deference.
And why does sycophancy almost always backfire in terms of real connection or respect? It seems like it should work, but...
Because it completely erodes your authenticity and integrity. You are literally not showing up as yourself. The relationships you build based on flattery and fakery are inherently shallow, superficial, leading to a profound sense of emptiness and isolation for the sycophant. You're not valued for who you are, your skills, your genuine contributions, but only for the carefully crafted facade you're presenting. The source highlights that it creates deeply unhealthy power dynamics where genuine merit and honest feedback are overlooked in favor of false loyalty and flattery.
Okay, so if trying too hard, being fake, or trying to please everyone out of fear backfires and stems from these deep-seated childhood fears, what does the research and practical wisdom from the sources actually suggest about building genuine connection and likability? It sounds like it's almost the opposite of trying hard.
It's fascinating because it very much shifts the focus outward and emphasizes showing up authentically rather than performing. Let's look at that Harvard study on questions and the tips from the ADD Resource Center and the online forum.
Yeah, the Harvard study has such a clear and seemingly simple message. It doesn't hurt to ask. What did they discover about the power of asking questions in conversation?
Well, they found that asking questions significantly increases how responsive you are perceived to be by your conversation partners. And being perceived as responsive is a key driver of being liked. Responsiveness, in this context, has three crucial components. Understanding, getting info about the other person. Validation, showing you value their perspective. And asking questions is a powerful form of validation. And caring, showing warmth and empathic concern. Crucially, you really need that understanding from asking questions before you can genuinely validate or care. Makes sense, right?
It does. And the ADD Resource Center article mentioned the study even quantified this, finding that asking around 9 questions in a 15-minute conversation really helps build rapport quickly.
Yes, that's a great specific takeaway. And the Harvard study found that the most impactful type of question you can ask is a follow-up question. That simple act signals that you weren't just waiting to talk, but you were genuinely listening to what the other person said, that you cared.
And get this, one of the most fascinating findings from the Harvard study was that people are consistently terrible at predicting how much asking questions makes them liked.
Exactly. People tend to think that talking about themselves, sharing their own stories and achievements will make a better impression or make them seem more interesting. This might be because that information is easier for them to access what the study calls a truncation error in predicting how conversations unfold. The sources suggest several reasons people don't ask enough questions. It could be simple egocentricity, being too focused on self, a lack of genuine social curiosity, maybe not being truly interested in others, or even fearing they might seem less competent or knowledgeable by asking instead of telling.
This focus on others, rather than being preoccupied with how you are coming across, it really aligns perfectly with the crowdsourced wisdom from the online forum too, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. So many of the most upvoted practical tips revolved around this outward focus. Listening more than talking. Asking people about themselves, showing genuine interest, and perhaps most emphatically, not interrupting or constantly trying to make conversations all about yourself, avoiding that one-upping tendency. One user shared a quote often attributed to Stephen R. Covey that captures this perfectly. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply.
Oh, that rings so true in so many interactions. Wow.
It does. Other highly valued tips from the forum included simple yet powerful actions like using people's names and cultivating genuine empathy, actively trying to see the world from others' perspectives.
What about how you present yourself? Is there science or wisdom there beyond just asking questions?
Yes, authenticity is key, and certain social cues matter significantly. The ADD Resource Center article mentions the importance of emotional expression, open body language, and overall social expressivity. The online forum specifically highlighted smiling, not necessarily meaning you feel genuinely happy every second, but using it as a deliberate social cue, a signal of approachability and openness that can genuinely brighten someone's day and make you seem more accessible.
Just a simple smile can make a difference.
Right. Also, being humble and able to admit when you're wrong came up repeatedly. Really important. Avoiding criticizing, condemning, or completing, connecting back to timeless advice like Dale Carnegie's, mentioned in the Reddit thread. The key here is sincerity, though. These actions need to feel genuine, not like a performance. And finally, being present in interactions and being reliable in your commitments were highlighted as crucial traits for building trust and rapport.
And it's empowering to remember some of the myths debunked in the ADD Resource Center article, too. First impressions aren't destiny. They can definitely change based on new information and later interactions. And that fascinating liking gap, the research shows you likely dramatically underestimate how much people actually warm up to you and like you after first meeting them. A user on the online forum also mentioned this underestimation thing.
Which really reinforces the idea that you don't need to strive for some unattainable perfection or expect universal, instant approval. People might like you more than you think already. It's a comforting thought.
Definitely. Circling back to that profound in-seed study, their final theme resonated deeply with this idea of change. They concluded that awareness is a critical impetus for change, isn't it? Understanding those unconscious drivers and childhood roots can truly pave the way, however difficult that path might be.
Yes, that self-awareness of why you feel the intense need to be liked and the patterns it creates is the essential first step. No doubt. The study highlighted that making intentional change means engaging in what they called small experiments towards unlikability. Kind of counterintuitive.
Like Zach standing up for himself at work when the project parameters unexpectedly changed, rather than just automatically acquiescing and saying, oh, I don't mind. Or Adela practicing deliberately disappointing people in small, low-stakes ways and just sitting with the intense discomfort it brought up.
Exactly. The study found these small steps are incredibly difficult, precisely because they challenge the deeply held big assumption. That terrifying fear of the worst-case scenario, abandonment, rejection, catastrophe that you believe will happen if you stop people-pleasing. The sources note there are powerful, hidden competing commitments, which are those unconscious reluctances rooted in fear, that make it incredibly hard to break free from the old, harmful patterns, even when the person knows intellectually that they are suffering and these patterns aren't serving them.
So change is definitely possible, but it requires immense courage and directly challenging those deeply ingrained childhood fears and assumptions about safety and belonging. It's not a quick fix, is it? But the sources suggest it's the path towards something much more authentic and fulfilling.
Yeah, this deep dive has really shown us the complex, almost paradoxical picture of wanting to be liked. On one hand, it's a natural human desire with real social and personal benefits, confirmed by research.
But on the other, the intense need to be liked, often rooted in childhood insecurity and unmet needs, can lead to self-sabotaging behaviors like fear-driven people-pleasing and calculated sycophancy. These behaviors, ironically, often prevent genuine connection and erode the very core of who you are. The surprising science and practical wisdom we explored point away from trying hard to please, be perfect, or perform a version of yourself you think others want. Instead, the power lies in shifting your focus outward, being genuinely interested in others by truly listening and asking questions, especially those follow-ups, and showing up authentically, being present, humble enough to admit fault, and being sincere in your interactions, even when that feels incredibly vulnerable.
Ultimately, the sources show us that awareness of why we struggle with these patterns is the essential first step. But changing those deep patterns is challenging, due to powerful unconscious fears and hidden competing commitments that fight against change. Yet, taking small, courageous steps to challenge those fears and assumptions is the path toward more authentic, fulfilling relationships, where you are valued for who you are, not for how well you perform agreeableness.
Definitely something for you to mull over. If the intense drive to be liked often stems from a deep-seated fear of not belonging, and true connection comes from vulnerability and focusing on others, what small step could you take today to shift just a little bit from fear-driven likability towards desire-driven, authentic connection?